morning, magandang umaga, and welcome to today's episode of My PI Dream. Boy, am I excited about today's episode. Today's episode is part 3 of a 3-part series that has to do with solar installation in your home. Now, what we're going to go into today are some of the dynamics, the technicals, all the things you wanted to know that were not part of the physical installation. We're going to talk about solar panels, we're going to talk about batteries, we're going to talk about inverters, we're going to talk about cost, we're going to talk about everything that you need to know if you want to install a system in your home. So let's go ahead and get into today's episode. So without further delay, let's get today's video underway. Now, before we get started with today's episode, something I want to share with you is I'm going to put a link in today's description block. And in that description block is going to be a link for GoSolar Philippines. GoSolar Philippines, they are the company that we purchased our system through. They did the installation. They have some of the best engineers in the market, and they did some of the greatest quality install that I can see. Also, what the management of GoSolar told me, that if you are interested in the system and you are a subscriber of My PI Dream, if you mention My PI Dream or Villa Feliz when you are contacting them, they will give you a special discount, and those are for subscribers of our channel. Now, as I said in the intro, today we're going to talk about the technicals. Today's all about all the parts associated, what you need to know before you actually decide on whether a solar system is right for you. We're going to be talking about each one of the specific facts about things like solar panels. We're going to be talking about inverters. We're going to talk about batteries. How much of these do you need to install your system so that you could tailor it to your own needs? And we're also going to talk about things like what the impact has been right here on Villa Feliz in the short period of time that we've had it installed. We're going to go and we're going to crunch some numbers. Well, let's go ahead and get into today's presentation, and we'll do a wrap up at the end. We'll see if we achieved our goal of actually getting as much off-grid as possible. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do, we're going to talk about solar systems. We call it demystifying solar systems for your home. And what we're going to do here is we're going to actually get into some of the basics. Let's go to the next slide. And what we want to talk about is why should you install a solar system? So the main things you want to install a solar system for is you want to lower your utility bill. Here in the Philippines, something that's really important is you want to protect against brownouts, what we call blackouts back in the US. And a really big thing that most people don't really think about quite so much has to do with saving the environment. Those greenhouse emissions that you can reduce by going with a renewable type of energy like solar. Let's talk about the main types of solar systems, and these are basics. What we're talking about through everything in here are the most commonly found things you'll see, and the easiest thing for you to be able to understand if you're asking questions to a solar installer, solar sales company. So the 3 main types of systems that we normally are looking for in residential construction is something called grid-tied, hybrid grid-tied, and off-grid. What we're going to explain here basically is when we talk about grid-tied has to do with you are connected to the grid. Your system is connected to the grid as far as you're receiving energy from your utility company, your electric utility company, and you're also going to take advantage of something like solar panels. So you are sharing your generation between the electric company and your solar panels. Now, unfortunately, solar only works during the daytime, so which leads us to the next type of solar system, so that you can be able to become as independent from your utility company as possible at nighttime. You need something called hybrid grid tied. And what that does, that brings in one more variable inside, which is batteries. So during the daytime, what you're going to do is you're going to generate electricity that's going to be able to power your house, and at the same time you're going to store energy, the excess energy that you don't use or consume in your house, and you're going to store that inside batteries for the nighttime. And you still have the option of using your utility company in the event that you don't have solar, you don't have enough generation from your solar system. And the last thing we're going to talk about right here is off-grid. Off-grid is really where you're not even connected. You see I have a little X mark inside there. You're disconnected from your utility company. And this is mainly in places that don't have any way for your utility company to get to your house, maybe on an island somewhere, or maybe you have a cabin that's way out in the woods, or you have an RV or something that you are not part of a utility company. And we're not really going to be talking about that because that doesn't really apply to today's situation. One other thing that I wanted to talk about when you're either grid tied or hybrid grid tied is your ability to sell back energy to the utility company. Now there's a misconception here, and the misconception sometimes is that you are actually selling and you're making money off of the energy that you sell back to the utility company. Well, that's not how it works. Basically, in most cases, when you have excess energy and you work with your utility company to set up something called net metering, they will come out and they will install an additional meter, and any of the excess power that you're not using can go back into the grid, and you can get a credit. And that credit is used during times when you are not creating enough electricity at your house, when you're not generating enough electricity, and you need to rely back on the grid, your utility company, and you will get some credits for that. Now I will tell you as a caveat, you will not normally ever get the same value that they charge you for electricity per kilowatt hour. A lot of times it's about half the price that they credit you for. So if you're like here, our electricity costs about 12.5 pesos per kilowatt hour. If we were to sell it back, I don't know the exact amount because we're not doing the net metering here, you'll get maybe 5-7 pesos per kilowatt hour credit back into your account at the electric company. Okay, we're going to talk about the components that make up a solar system. It's very easy. It's really not complicated. There's mainly three things that you have for your ability to generate electricity. It's your solar panels, called PV panels or photovoltaic panels, inverter, and then a battery, and there's some ancillary equipment that's associated with that for safety, and that we're talking about breakers and things like that. So if we want to go through what these things do, your PV panels, what your PV panels are doing, they're collecting energy. So what they do, they have silicon wafers inside each one of the panels, and they have P-type and N-type of wafers inside there, and it's all about electrons. What happens when the sun hits those panels, it excites things up inside the panels. And what happens, it's a physics type of a thing, a lot of the negative electrons, they kind of like, these atoms, they kind of disappear, which leaves your panels positively charged. Those positively charged electrons inside there are converted into electricity in the form of direct current, DC power. And then it goes into the inverter, and what your inverter normally does, it will convert that DC power into AC electricity that's used for your house. Now if you have a hybrid system, your hybrid system is going to take some of that DC power and charge up your batteries so that you can use those batteries at nighttime. It's going to go again from DC power at nighttime and go back into your inverter. It's going to convert that into AC power for your nighttime needs. And what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the most common types of PV cells. I get a lot of questions that come through in emails where people are asking about some of the makeup of things like PV cells and batteries. And what we're going to talk about here is the most common types of PV panels that you're going to find when you go to a solar company and you're asking about what you need or what you're looking for. We're going to give some tips about what you should be looking for. Now the most common types of solar cell type PV panels are monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and thin film. And you can see in the explanation right here, it says that the monocrystalline, it's the oldest and the most developed type of solar panels. They're considered the premium panels in the market right now. And when we say premium, it's cost affordable, but they also have a high efficiency. And we're going to talk about efficiency in just a little bit. They're made from a single mono crystal silicon solar cell. So they're not parts, lots of different things are fragmented or anything like that. They're very pure. And one of the good things about it, they last a long period of time, and they have very high efficiencies. And we're going to talk about efficiencies here in just a moment as well. Greater than or equal to 20%. The next type of a solar cell is a polycrystalline type, and it's made from fragments of the silicon crystal inside. They're all melted together. It's not as pure as a monocrystalline type of a solar cell. It's considered mid-range. It's less expensive than the monocrystalline type of a panel. But being that it's less expensive and it's not as pure, it has a lower efficiency and a shorter lifespan than the monocrystalline type. And its efficiencies are lower. As I said, the efficiencies are somewhere between 15 to 17%. And last but is the thin film. The thin film, and it's the construction of it. It's made of silicon and these other things that are listed on the slide right here. The actual physical structure, it's very, very thin. As it says in the first line here, it's 350 times thinner than crystalline wafers. The advantage of these type of cells, type of solar cell types, is it can be made into things where they need to be molded or shaped, and they're used for things like shingles, where you have integrated shingles that you can install, or solar roof tiles. So you can, when you go to some companies, they can sell you these built into it. They're the least expensive, but their efficiency is very low, about 11%. Now there's a big drawback about those that are built into your tiles or shingles. Remember, and I really haven't mentioned it, so you don't remember, but the thing is, there is a life expectancy on all type of solar panels. So it might not be a really great idea to have these integrated into your roof tiles, because these are something that probably one day you're going to have to replace, and it could be an expensive venture to be replacing all your tiles just because they've lost their efficiency. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about factors that affect solar panel efficiency, and you're going to see in the end of today's episode, when we start talking about the numbers, when we start crunching numbers, it has to do with expectations of what you're going to get out of your system. So things that will affect the efficiency, what's rated, what you see in the advertisements, are things called shading, panel orientation, temperature, location, time of year, and dust and dirt. When we say shading, it's not a good idea to have your solar panels where they're going to be blocked by things like trees or structures during the daytime, because what happens with a lot of solar panels is your solar panels are going to be interrupted. When they're all hooked together, sometimes what will happen with a solar panel is when one area is not getting any sunlight that's going to be helping with the generation of the electricity, the other panels are going to go down as well for production, because they're all going to try to stabilize the amount of electricity to whatever the lowest level is of all the panels. Panel orientation has a lot to do with how they're set up. Again, in the northern hemisphere, you want your panels kind of oriented facing south, and the southern hemisphere is the opposite. You want them face north. Also, when it has to do with the amount of panels, if you have a flat roof, that's an optimal way of installing panels, all of them at one time, instead of like what we have here at Villa Feliz. We have, because of the architecture of our roof, we have some panels on one side, some panels on the other. So that is going to affect our efficiency of how much electricity we can have. But if you have a flat roof and you can get them all oriented according to the way the sun runs all day long, that's probably the best method for you to do. Location. Or temperature. The temperature, heat and cold both affect different types of panels, and you can look at that with the vendor. You can talk with the vendor who's selling you, and most of the time the vendors that are selling you the panels, they know what's best for your climate in your area. Location, of course, the efficiency of of your panels has to do with how many hours a day that you can actually receive sun. Where we are here in the Philippines, we get a lot of hours. Maybe down in Australia near the equator, you're going to get a lot of hours. On the contrary, if you're living in close to the North or South Pole, you're only going to get so many hours, a very small amount during certain times of the year. So that will affect how much generation that you get from your solar panels. And dust and dirt have to do with when they are laying on top of the panels. When they get dirty, you are not going to be as efficient because the sun cannot get through all those layers of dust and dirt on there. So it's really important that you clean your solar panels on a regular basis. Over time, PV panels efficiency degrades. So the panels aren't good forever. They have a life expectancy, and over years you'll see you should see a chart that comes with your panel, and what it will do, it will show you after 10 years what your expected return, where your efficiency of that panel is going to be. 25 years, what you can expect, and it's usually like 10 years. I believe I have a note somewhere later on. About 10 years you can expect only a reduction of about 10%, and maybe down to about 80% after about 25 years. And some things that can affect the longevity of your panel, the ability of them to work properly, are exposures to the UV light. They have something that's called thermal expansion and cooling caused by microfractures in the silicon wafers themselves. And it can cause something called potential induced degradation. And our SCG panels that we have installed around the house actually they employ a anti-PID technology. So that's something you should look at when you're looking at some of the specs. One more thing I want to talk about solar panels, and it has to do with something we installed here when we're talking about types of solar panels. We have something that's called PERC solar panels, passive emitter and rear contact and rear cell. And what that is, it's a fancy way of saying some of the sun that goes through it is allowed to bounce back up again, and we can collect basically on the return to be able to use some of that reflective light to gain an additional amount of power. So PERC technology it's a very popular technology, and something that's being employed in a lot of today's PV panels. So if you have an opportunity and your vendor sells these, it's something you might want to talk with them, so that you can get what it says right here, 6 to 12% more energy than conventional solar panels. Next thing I want to talk about is inverters. This is the second part of the three major parts of the solar system. Basically, it says how inverters work, and they basically convert DC power into AC power needed for your home, or to feed back to the grid if you're doing that net metering. Inside the solar inverter, some solar inverters have charge controllers integrated inside, and some of the smaller systems, an extra component that I didn't talk about for the three is a charge controller that would be outside. For some of the simpler systems, they're going to need, and when I say there's simpler systems and smaller systems, maybe if you have a small cabin, you have a very small system, you'll use a charge controller to take the energy that comes from the solar panel, and they will convert them into DC power to charge your batteries. Then your batteries are going to go back into an inverter, and inside the inverter they're going to convert the DC power to AC to supply your house. You can see the charge controllers, I say, used to keep the battery from overcharging. That's really important. That's one of the most important roles of a charge controller and a inverter, is to keep the batteries from overcharging by regulating the voltage and current. I have something inside here. I say there's 5 types of solar charge controllers. I talk about here I say shunt, series regulator, PWM, MPPT, and diversion load controls. MPPT charge controllers are the most common, and we're going to talk about those in the next slide here. So, and the different types of solar inverters, the 3 different types, which are string inverters, power power optimizers, plus inverter, and microinverters. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of each one of these. The pros of the string inverter, which is what we have here at Villa Feliz in our day inverter, it's the oldest and the most commonly used inverter today. It's one of the most reliable and least expensive solar inverter options. Those are the pros for a string inverter. And the cons are they're affected by shading. Again, when one of the solar panels cuts out because of some shading, it's going to affect some of the other ones inside the string. Now, our inverter that we have here, the day inverter, it is a MPPT type of a charger unit inside, and it does things that's called strings. It has strings, which basically you can take. When I say strings, you can have a string of panels connected on one side of your house, a string of panels on your other side, and you can take both of those strings and put those inside your inverter, where that if you have a problem with shading, you won't have, if it's only on one string, the other string won't be affected. That's a pro to that. The power optimizers, the pros for and they have something on each one of the panels instead of inside your inverter itself. They decrease the impact on shading, because what they'll do, it's like a little microcomputer on each one, and they'll evaluate the situation of each one of your inverter of your panels, and what they'll do, they'll compensate for that. And a pro for that is they allow for panel level monitoring. If you're troubleshooting, unlike the string inverter, if you're troubleshooting, you are going to identify to the individual panel that you might be having a problem. On a string inverter, everything is like one group clustered all together, and it's not going to allow you to do the detailed troubleshooting of an individual panel if you're having problems. The cons of the power optimizer, they're more expensive than string inverters, but less than the next category we're going to talk about, the microinverter. And they're more difficult to repair, basically because they're on your roof. Unless you have a flat roof like our Canadian neighbors across the street. If you have a problem with the actual electronic component of the power optimizer that does the optimizing, you're going to have to crawl on your roof, and you're going to have to either remove that portion, and it's more difficult to reach. The microinverters, they have like a mini computer also on each one, or the mini inverter on each one of the solar panels. They're the latest in solar inverter technology, and they also have a minimal impact on shading. Now here at Villa Feliz, we don't have to worry with the shading because we have no trees that block any of the panels here. Our house is tall enough, so even the trees across the street don't make shading on our roof. Now the cons about microinverter, they're the most expensive of all these types of inverters that we talked about today, and just like the power optimizer, they're more difficult to repair because they are located on the roof. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the solar charge controllers, and these are mainly for very, very small systems. If you have a very small house, or if you have a little cabin and you want to be off the grid, they are probably something that you're going to see if you're trying to put together a system. And they're basically the most commonly used solar charge converters are PWM. These are pulse width modulation, and the MPPT, which is the maximum power point tracking that we talked about, that we have inside our inverter inside our house here at Villa Feliz. Let's talk about briefly PWM and more economical for smaller systems. Like I said, small workspace, cabins, tiny homes, RVs, etc. And they are again for very small systems. The MPPT is more expensive but better for large residential homes, especially in off-grid situations. So they are what you're going to see more commonly when you go from residential type of installs. Okay, what I want to talk about now is solar batteries. 4 different types of solar batteries, and these are the main. And one of the types of batteries that we have here, they have a bunch of subcategories, and we'll talk about that briefly. So what you're going to generally see in solar installations are people installing with either lead acid batteries, which are deep cycle, lithium ion batteries, NiCad, nickel cadmium, and flow batteries. Lead acid are kind of like old school, but they'll also still be used with some of the very small systems, and they're the cheapest. When I talk about lead acid, the lead acid batteries are very similar to the type of a battery you find inside your car, but more likely for something like a boat or an RV, for the deep cycle. It doesn't provide a quick injection of power like you need to start your vehicle, but it will last for a very long period of time. The pros, that they're the cheapest, and they're reliable. The cons are they require ventilation and maintenance. Remember, car batteries and everything, you have to add water, you have to do regular maintenance to those. And one of the biggest disadvantages are they have a low depth of charge. When I speak of depth of charge, or depth of discharge, the depth of discharge, you can only go to about 50% of discharge before you need to recharge this battery back up again. So you only get to really use half of it. And they have a very short lifespan. The advertised are 5 to 10 years, but most likely, from what I've seen, you're probably going to be closer to about 3 to 5 years of a lifespan of your batteries. Then you're going to have to replace them. The next category is the most common right now, and it has to do with lithium-ion batteries, which is what we have installed here at Villa Feliz. And there are a bunch of subcategories that have to do with different types of Li-ion type of batteries, NMCs, LMOs, NCA, LFPs. LFPs are what we're using here. They're more like the Lyre, the lithium iron phosphate type of a battery. Just some of the newer type of batteries. The great thing about them, they have almost no type of maintenance that you have to deal with. They have a higher depth of charge for longer lifespan. And when I say depth of discharge, you can go down to sometimes 100%. You can discharge almost down to zero, although I don't recommend it. Most of the time people are going to tell you you should go probably around between 10 and 30% of discharge on them. And they have a great lifespan. The lifespan is greater than or equal to 10 years, with some getting up to 15 and 20 years on their lifespan. The cons, they're more expensive than the other energy options, but in the long haul, I think those are the best option for most of the people that we're talking to here. And there is a disadvantage also. The cons are they're more expensive, like I said, and they have some of the older Li-ion batteries have something called thermal runaway. They become overcharged, and they can actually, if you don't have a good regulator, they can actually catch fire. But with the newer batteries, especially the Lyre batteries like what we have right here, those aren't an issue anymore. NiCad batteries, the nickel cadmium, the pros, they are almost no maintenance is required, and they operate in extreme temperatures. But the cons are they're extremely toxic, and that has to do with disposal of these types of batteries. They can actually harm the environment, and they have a problem with the memory. I'm sure you're very familiar with batteries losing their memory, and they don't know when to charge to the correct amount or discharge to the correct amount before they actually end up becoming unusual. And the last one inside these categories right here are called flow batteries. They're the latest in the solar battery technology. These are the ones that can actually go to 100% depth of discharge. They can go down to zero, and you can keep recharging them from zero back up and forth, so you can get the most use, you can get the most energy and storage out of these. They're fire retardant, and they have the longest lifespan out of all of them, up to 30 years. Now the cons are they are low storage capacity, and the most expensive of all. When I say low storage capacity, these are huge. They're huge for you to be able to have the storage capacity of what you need for something like your residence. And that's the reason why they're not normally used for residential purposes. They're mainly used for big storage farms. Storage farms are big, like utility companies that are using these to provide storage to put back inside the grid. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about are warranties. This is something everybody is always asking about. Solar system warranties. On solar panels, what you're going to find that they typically have two type of warranties. They have a performance, and they have an equipment level for warranties. The performance, when I say performance, that's how much they are going to be able to perform 90% efficiency or 80% efficiency, and the performance warranty, they guarantee most of the time performance of 9% at 10 years and about 80% at 25 years. That's the general industry standard. And the other has to do with equipment, whether they work or not. The equipment is actually functioning, and the general warranty for these are between 10 and 12 years. Now, batteries. Lead acid batteries generally have about a 5-year warranty. Lithium ion generally have about a 10-year warranty with an end of warranty capacity of 60% and 60 cycles or throughput. These are kind of the caveats that they put on top of these that they don't really talk too much about. And it has to do, again, with the when it exceeds the warranty period of 10 years, and your system is still doing 60%, and the cycles. If you exceed the amount of cycles for charge, they say, and they can go inside the battery and they can look, it will record. They're smart batteries these days, and if you exceeded those, it's going to reduce your compensation on your warranty. Inverters, typically between 5 and 10 years. All right, now the big question that everybody is asking, how much solar do I need? And I'm going to talk briefly, and it's based on determining your cost, investment, and your return. And this is based on our needs right here, and you can adjust your needs to your situation and what you're trying to get out of your system. So for our situation right here, what I've done to determine how much hardware I need, how many solar panels I need, how many batteries I need, the size of the inverter. The first thing that you want to do is you want to calculate your requirement. And the best way to do that is grab all of your old utility bills. Go back a year on your utility bills. Determine what your monthly bill is. Determine what your annual bill is. And if you can, determine what your daily consumption is. And that's what I did here. So I looked at what my normal daily consumption. Of course, normally your daily consumption is going to be higher than your nighttime consumption because at nighttime you're sleeping. You're not using all these things at nighttime unless you're running air conditioning all through the night. That's going to be one big thing to consider. So you review your electricity bill, get an understanding of your daily, monthly, and annual in kilowatt hours of your electricity. Then again, I said try to determine your daytime and nighttime consumption, and then purchase a system that's going to provide you with enough of your daytime solar generation to handle all of your daytime needs, plus enough that's left over to charge those batteries that you're going to need for the nighttime. So this is what I use. And an example, let me show you an example. Also, before I go to the next one, what you want to do is you want to calculate this all based on what you see over here to the left. You see this little graph. Look at what your solar year is going to be like, your solar day through your solar year. Look for the months that are going to be the hardest to get solar energy. Basically, it's the shortest part of your solar year. It might be like here in the Philippines, which this chart that you see to the left has to do with rainy season. You'll see at the lower end how many hours of solar I can expect. It's going to be affected by how many hours that are affected by the clouds and rain and the amount of hours that you have. So those are all considerations you need to when you're determining when is your most trying time on your solar system. So you want the time of year when it's going to be the most difficult. You want that to be your baseline. So for our example here at Villa Feliz, we average about 800 kilowatts per month. That's based on previous recordings that I had from all of my bills that I have. I have a spreadsheet that I use, an Excel spreadsheet, and I look at my consumption month after month after month. So at 800 kilowatts per month, if you divide that by 30, which is the average month, our daily consumption is going to be about 27 kilowatts. So I need to be able to provide enough power for that daily consumption of 27 kilowatts, but I need to break it down daytime and nighttime a little bit better. So we know that our best solar collection here is about 6 hours a day between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. That's when I can generate the most electricity, when the sun is up and going good and collecting and putting energy into our battery and also providing energy to our home. So this is the time that we need to make our calculation. So when we made our calculation, we decided that we needed 18 550 watt panels. And theoretically, and I had to put this little caveat inside it, theoretically it can produce 9.9 kilowatts hours, and that's 550 watts times 18. That's going to give us 9.9 kilowatts an hour. But more realistically, it's around 4.5 kilowatts of hour. And you're saying, oh James, that's like half the amount. Well, you have to take a lot of things into consideration. When you get these numbers from the solar panel manufacturers, they give you these numbers based on something called an STC number, standard test condition, or laboratory conditions. These are the most perfect conditions that you can always have for them to give you that number. So that 550 is on STC. We will never be in a perfect laboratory condition here based on the angle of our roof, the amount of hours of sun that we get a day, the weather conditions, the angle of our panel. There's so many factors that are going to affect what our actual expectations of our output. So what they normally will do, when you look at the specs, you're going to see STC and you're going to see something that's called NOCT. And the NOCT is the nominal operating cell temperature, and that's really more of a more realistic what you're going to see inside the field at your home. So for these 550, the NOTC is rated for these panels at 414. So if you multiply 18 times 414, it's going to give us just over 7,000, or exactly 700, or 7,452 watts per hour. So that is, and that's what I am seeing when we're looking at our generation. That's about what it is. Okay, so I know how many panels I need. Our original one, we actually had 15 panels, but we realized that was not going to be enough, and we got them to stick a few extra panels because after I started doing all this research. Now, are we going to be able to realistically gather that amount? So during the daytime, we are going to need, let's see, our daytime need is going to be 6.75 kilowatts based on previous records and our evaluation. And we're going to need to store about 20 kilowatts of power for the nighttime, for the batteries. So the 6.75 during the daytime, 20 kilowatts, about 18 hours on batteries overnight, is about 27.55. Did our system do that? And this is going to be, the next slide is our real world results. Was I able to achieve that? Okay, so what I did was I went out to our meter, I looked at our meter, and on our meter I calculated how many kilowatt hours that I am on right now. So I looked at the last meter reading, I took that number when the meter reader came, I took where we are today, and we actually used, from the time he came until today, we used, let's see, what does it say inside here? Our total consumption on the grid was 69 kilowatt hours. Okay, you have to realize the numbers here of our generation here, our solar generation. We got the system installed on the 11th of the month. We had about 2 days when they were doing the installation, and it didn't get commissioned until the 13th of the month. So we had 2 days all being done on the grid, and we had how many days? What is that? That's something like 12 days or something like that. That we did 12 days, approximately 12 days with the solar installed. So what I am saying here, if you look at this, we only purchased after the installation of the solar system, we only purchased 69 kilowatt hours from our electric company, and the rest of it that was generated in the house to keep everything running came from our solar generation equipment. So in numbers, in dollars and peso cents, we paid 843 pesos to the utility company. Well, that's what we would be built if we were to be built today, and that's the equivalent of about $15. So what are we talking about? We're talking about half the month already. We've only obligated about $15 US, or 843 pesos, to our utility company. So I would say, let's see, and we use 299.8 299.80 kilowatt hours is what we generated from this solar system. So in conclusion, did we meet our goal to minimize our footprint on the grid? yeah, we achieved that. Now, again, my small caveat that I have inside here is that we originally started with a concept we thought we only needed 15 panels with 3 batteries. We modified that to 18 panels with 4 batteries. Especially right after the very beginning, we kind of saw the nighttime generation. We were running out of power about 1 a.m. in the morning. That's why we added the additional battery. Now, something I also want to say is when it comes to the batteries, the values that they show on the batteries for your nighttime consumption, if your battery is like for us about 20 kilowatts, you're not going to get 20 kilowatts in for your consumption inside your house off of these batteries, because batteries are normally configured for a depth of discharge to a certain period. Our depth of discharge that we have configured, which you can change it, is at 30%. What does that mean? That means when it gets to 30%, we are stopping sending the energy from the batteries to our house, so that we protect the battery, because some batteries, if you go too low and you exhaust too much of it, it will reduce the lifespan of your battery. So what we are doing is try to protect it by putting our cutoff at about 30%. 20%, when it gets down to 20%, the batteries will shut off and protect themselves. That area between 30% and 20%, and 10% of energy in there, is used to provide energy to the inverter in the event that we don't have energy coming from any other source, and we don't want to turn the inverter off. So that's our protectionary way of doing things inside there. Again, check with your solar company installer for what works the best for you. Okay, let's go ahead and close out today's video outside of this presentation. Well, there you have it. That was kind of a long presentation, but there were just so many details that I wanted to get inside and share, so I don't have to come back and do a follow-up on this episode. I want to close out the solar episode series that we have here. There are some questions that people ask that I receive in email and through some of the comments. Like one of the things one person was asking about the construction of the frame for the solar panel. What's the normal construction? Well, it's aluminum. They normally do aluminum for the frame because it's lightweight, it's non-corrosive, it's strong, it's durable. There's some other materials that they use, but on the standard, that's what they use there. Also, I think there was something else that I wanted to make sure that I covered. Oh, and it had to do with return on investment. I could have done a whole section on ROI, return on investment. Your ROI, basically, when somebody tells you ROI, it's how much did you invest in all the equipment, in your system, and how long from the savings is it going to take you to achieve that same amount? So basically your utility bill savings to be able to cover that entire cost of your solar system. And on the average, depending on your system, it can average anywhere somewhere between 5 and 8 to 9 to 10 years. I think 5 to 8 is probably the average. Of course, the larger the system, the more equipment, it's going to take more time to be able to recover, because the expenditure that you initially did is more. Of course, you can do things like save money on your own. If you wanted to do your own solar system installation, if you have a good grasp of the background and you know all the safety that's involved inside there, maybe you're a licensed electrician and you could do that, you could probably save quite a bit. I think just on our system right here, we could probably save almost somewhere in the amount of maybe about 50,000, about $1,000 US had we done it ourselves. But I'm not crawling up on the wall, and I felt really confident once we talked to the fine folks from GoSolar, the people who did the installation right here. They convinced me that they knew what they were doing, and they were the ones to actually do our install, and they did. I got to tell you, I am really happy with our installation from this particular company. There's a lot of companies out there. I spoke with other people who have had solar installs, even right here inside our subdivision, and the level of support that happens right after, and problems that they've had, and they have had problems. We actually have one of our residents here that had a full solar system installed 3 years ago, and it's never worked, and they couldn't even get the company to come back out. So he made a huge investment, and he has zero return on his investment. So it's really important to get a good company who's reputable. So if you're shopping around, shop around, get the advice, make sure they've been in business for a while, contact some of their clients, like the good folks at GoSolar actually gave us a ride out to one of the clients' houses, a couple of clients' houses, and we took a look at the installation that they had done a couple of years earlier, and we thanked them for that. And GoSolar did a great job. We really appreciate their help on this job, and we're real happy. Well, that's about it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other questions. There were some mistakes inside the presentation, and I'll try to go back during post-editing and try to correct some of the comments inside there. But I think we're good on this Solar Series episode. If you have any other questions also, again, put it inside the comment section. Shoot me an email. Please don't do it on Facebook, because I don't know when I'll ever get back on Facebook. I don't really do a lot of business on Facebook. I keep telling folks that, but I still keep getting stuff on Facebook. Again, that's it. Our next episode, I think we're going to be doing our final follow-up on our Canadian neighbors build. I think they're to the point where most everything's installed. There's some touch-up painting going on, but I want to close out the Casa V episode on that build right there. So I think that's going to be the next episode. Look forward to that. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed these last 3 series of episodes for the solar installation. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up. Please share, and if you have not subscribed, just click on that little MPID Dream heart in the bottom right hand side of your screen. You'll be subscribed, and if you ring that bell, you'll be notified the next time I upload a new video. So until such time, from right here in the beautiful, not so sunny today, Philippines, you have a wonderful and blessed day. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to see more just like these, just click on one of the helpful links over to your right, and you might be able to pick up on some good information on DIY projects, how to, or if you are interested in moving to the Philippines and building, you'll find answers there as well.